I'm making Kotu the Kakamora from Moana 2 out of real coconuts.
Out of the tree, now you got coconuts.
And I do got coconuts. Basically, what I'm envisioning is sort of a Mr. Potato Head situation, but the Mr. Potato Head from the 40s when it first came out, where you were intended to use an actual potato as the body, and then you could stick in the arms and legs and facial features to make your own custom potato head, but with coconuts. Kakamora, as I understand it, are from Polynesian mythology, and they're said to wear coconuts as armor. And in Moana and Moana 2, they're depicted as these little guys that have a coconut for their main kind of body. And then they have different facial features that seem to be hand-painted, and different accessories and clothing items that give them personality. So my thought is that I could 3D print kind of a universal arm and leg system to make a base Kakamora, and then there could be different customization options through the masks or painting on a different face, something like that. So that's the general idea, and I want to make Kotu for myself. Kotu is the son of the Kakamora chief, so he parallels Moana in that sense, and I really like his design. He's got a cool mask with sharp teeth, and then he has a necklace of shark teeth, and a couple of other really cool design features. Paint on his mask looks pretty cool. So I originally went to Walmart and I got 3 of this size coconut. Fairly small, fits in the hand pretty well, and it would work just fine. But the problem is that I originally did my 3D design and modeling off of this reference coconut. And this one is actually a coconut that I previously made into a kalimba. And I was using this diameter when I was making all of my sculpts, and I was impatient. Before I got the coconuts, I actually went ahead and 3D printed most of what I was going to be putting on it. So here I am with 3D prints that are way too big for the coconuts that I have. And I could just print them again, but that would mean running the printer again, and I'm cat sitting for my brother and his girlfriend, and I really don't want to freak the little guy out who's staying in the 3D printer room. So I'd like to avoid doing the prints over again, which means that I need bigger coconuts. So I got 3 of these from Kroger, quite a bit bigger. I think this was the same size of the coconut I used for the kalimba, and I think I probably got those at Kroger. The only issue here is that you can probably see this score line that is put all the way around the coconut, and that's to make it easier to crack the shell, because that can be a quite difficult process. So as long as you don't mind that score line being present in your final product, I would go with the bigger coconuts. I also think that this is a better scale for what the Kakamora actually look like compared to the humans in the movies. So to start, I decided that instead of cracking the coconut in half like you're intended to along the score line, I would trace out and cut out with my rotary tool the faceplate so that I could have easy access to the flesh of the coconut, and I could remove it and then replace the faceplate once it looked more like a Kakamora face. And then it just becomes getting the actual flesh out, which is the hard part. So I read online that that can be easier with different temperatures, which makes a lot of sense. The first suggestion was to freeze the entire coconut and then thaw it out. The idea being that if you've ever had frozen vegetables, once you heat them back up, they kind of lose all of their texture. So it would make that flesh less firm and easier to get out. And it did, but what I failed to realize is that most normal people don't care about maintaining a full coconut shell, and coconut flesh, like most things, expands when it freezes. So that's what I did with this coconut, and as you can see, I was able to remove all of the flesh from the inside, but it did expand and crack the shell in several places. So not great. Another idea I read online was to use heat instead to soften the coconut flesh. So they said to put the coconut in a 375-degree oven for about half an hour, and that would soften the flesh. And it does. Again, I got a pretty clean coconut shell. The problem is something about the moisture differential between the coconut flesh and the shell caused the shell to warp. So now the top does not fit on. And if my plan is to remove the faceplate, take out the flesh, and then replace the faceplate, I need it to fit back in place. So I need some method that doesn't deform the shell. So if the moisture is a problem, why not just use a heat source that includes moisture, like a pressure cooker? And I have an Instant Pot, so I figured let's just chuck a coconut in an Instant Pot for 10 minutes. Let me just say really quickly that I don't know what happens when you put a fully intact coconut in a pressure cooker, and I don't intend to find out. So I'm going to be cutting into mine first. Pressure cook at your own risk, or just take some precautions first. Step one is drilling through the eyes. To drain the coconut water. I freehanded this last time, but I'll just trace on this faceplate from another coconut I experimented on. I'm gonna go in between these like nodes here. I think those will probably be thicker and harder to cut through. Now we cut. Alright, that's the general outline, but that's obviously not thick enough to get through the full shell, so I'll switch to this bit just to get through to the flesh of the coconut, and then I'll switch to the jigsaw. And finish up with the jigsaw. And we're open. Now we got to get all that flesh out. Into the Instant Pot with about a cup of water for about 10 minutes on high pressure. And we'll be back when that's done.
While we're waiting on that, I figured I would walk you through my design process for the 3D printed parts. You may recognize this program as Nomad Sculpt, and if you did, that means that you probably have more experience with it than I did at this point. I have never done any kind of digital sculpting prior to this project, so I was really excited to give it a try. In fact, my only design experience at all has been in Tinkercad, which is a really easy way to make simple geometric models. And those have gotten the job done so far, but I really wanted to try a more artistic sculpting process for 3D design, which uses more organic shapes that can be really helpful when designing a living creature. I initially wanted to try Blender, and I know that Blender has a lot more capabilities when it comes to rendering and lighting and animation, but Nomad Sculpt seemed right for my specific situation here. And that situation is that my wife had an iPad I could use, and for me, moving around a digital space like this is so much easier on an iPad compared to a computer. So I downloaded it and I headed straight to YouTube for some tutorials. And I quickly found Dave Reed, who has a lot of tutorials on how to use Nomad Sculpt, introductory lessons on how to use the different tools, and they were super helpful. You could probably see one of them playing at the start of this video. And I used those videos as kind of a jumping off point, and then kind of taught myself from there, and it was a really fun process. So let me show you what I've been working on for the past couple of days, and I do mean a couple of days because digital sculpting is still kind of a lengthy process for me, but I think I'm getting better and I'm having fun. So we have Kotu here. This is the reference image that I've been using. Nice dynamic pose. Of course, I'll be sculpting a static one, so good move, Brian. But we start, of course, as you do, with a coconut. I did just model in a quick blob to serve as a coconut, just as a stand-in that I can sculpt around. If you do want to print this as your coconut, you're more than welcome to. Of
course, I'm going to be using a real coconut, but do what works best for you. So we do start with the coconut and make it look a little bit more like a little guy by adding some limbs. And you can see that I took a couple of creative liberties here. Specifically, the big toe in the reference is about the same size as the other toes, and I made mine bigger because I like that. It looks nice. I think it adds some character and my own kind of personal touch to the model. So I did do that. And then I have the arms here with just an open palm design for the arms. Of course, I do have variations for the arms, where this is kind of a curled finger design, kind of a loose grab, you could call that. And then I have a third design that is more of a tightly gripped fist, more curled in fingers. Of course, it's not like a really tight balled fist. I think that gives it a lot of character and personality to have that sort of loose grip there. So mix and match whatever arms you want to use, totally up to you. The important part is that no matter what arms you want to use, they are all attached in the same way. And that is with this ball joint here. And I'll get rid of the coconut so that we can see that a little better. So this is what I have come up with for a ball joint. Traditionally, a ball and socket joint consists of a ball and a socket. And the ball is static and the socket has some flexibility to it. So when the ball comes in, it meets the socket, which expands to accept the ball and then closes back over it. And then the ball can move around. And that requires for the socket to be able to expand. And I wanted my sockets to be in the limbs. Theoretically, the limbs could have terminated in the ball and then the socket could be on the coconut, but that would mean that the whole joint would still be visible. I could hide it all if I put the socket in the limbs, which you've seen me do here with these little half domes. So that means that the ball portion has to be on the coconut, and since the sockets are in the limbs, they can't expand because there's too much plastic. It would be too rigid. So that means I need that sort of action, that movement to be in the ball. So what I did is I made this kind of hollow sphere, and then I reinforced the corners here to make it a little stronger. And so basically you have your socket and you have your ball, but now the ball can compress to fit into the socket and then expand when it's in there. And so you get the same kind of articulation, just now I can hide that ball and socket joint. You can see here that I have a circle cut out of the center. Basically, you drill a tiny pilot hole into the coconut, and then you can screw this joint permanently onto the coconut and then snap all of your limbs into place. And that should work for all 4 limbs and any combination of the type of limbs that you want to use. I'll bring my coconut back. And moving on, we have my favorite part of the sculpt, and this is the mask. And there is so much character in this mask. I love this design. It really brings this Kakamora Kotu to life. So if I zoom out, you can see that I tried to match the reference image as best as I could. And I think I did a pretty good job of that. You'll notice that I am missing a couple of sections, and that's because I think these are separate bones, and I've labeled those the auxiliary bones, so I'll just bring those in really quickly and remove the coconut again for visibility. So yeah, I have these bones modeled separately, and they're just kind of hanging out in the back, but it looks like from the reference image that they're tied on with like twine. So I have them separately modeled with holes so that I can tie them together. The part that confused me about the whole thing, though, is actually this section right back here where it all connects. And actually where the mask is held on in general confused me. I looked at as many references of Kotu as I could, stills from the movie, scenes where you can see a profile, and there's no clear indication of how these masks are even held in place. They look to be floating in place in a couple of scenes. So I wanted some way to tie everything together. So I did create this accent bone, I'm calling it, and I just have it on the one side here. Basically, this accent bone is just serving as a place for me to tie everything together, and then also to attach those spines that you can see here in the reference image. I decided not to print those spines out on the 3D printer because to give them any sort of strength, it would be way more effort than it's worth. And I think I can actually get away with making those out of zip ties. There's a size of zip tie that I can attach to these auxiliary bones, this accent bone, that I think will look pretty good in that place. So that's the plan for that. And for the next part, I will actually take off the mask because I also modeled these face plates. Basically, my plan is to have the faceplate incorporated into the coconut, but if you don't want to cut into the coconut at all, you'd rather just print this detail, you can do that. I've modeled a base faceplate that has no features. You can paint on your own face, paint in the eyes. You don't have to cut into the coconut whatsoever. That way, the only adjustments you'll need to make are those ball joints. If you do like eyes on your faceplate, I do have a couple of other options that include eyes. This one has two relatively circular eyes with a small mouth in the center. It's actually fairly similar to Kotu's actual face under the mask, so you could use that in place of making a face for him. Then I have a face here with closer together large eyes, which is actually fairly similar to the chief. And then a third face with these small far apart eyes, which this design is used in a couple of the different background Kakamoras. We'll bring the mask back and add in the shark necklace. That's the next part that I modeled in. It's actually just one tooth copied 5 times, and then I changed the size just to give it a little bit of variation. And in the reference, he's got more than 5. Theoretically, it could go all the way around, but again, it's never really shown in the movie how it attaches in the back or how it even looks in the back. So I think I'll just stick with 5. And so far, all of these details are specific to Kotu, but you could have just a general generic Kakamora with these base models. I also modeled in a couple of accessories that some of the background Kakamora are seen wearing. First one is this head horn, and then I have this spiral shell. So between this, the arm combinations, the face plates, painting on different face designs, there are so many combinations that you can make just with these models. And we can also model more accessories, clothing options, tools. A lot of them have weapons. We can do all that in the future, but this is a pretty good start. So to put it all together, this is my design of Kotu the Kakamora in Nomad Sculpt. And for making it all from scratch, I gotta say, I'm pretty proud of it. Had a lot of fun doing this. Now we just have to print it. I'll get those started, and while those are going, I think the Instant Pot might be ready.
And there we go, 10 minutes later, and we have a coconut now full of water. And as you can see, the flesh is already removing itself coming up from the shell, so simple as that. For the main portion, I find the easiest method is to take a knife and cut strips all the way along the inside, and then use a spoon to get in these gaps and pry the flesh out, because it can still be pretty difficult, but much easier than it was.
Well done. So I went ahead and sanded off all of the coconut fuzz from the faceplate. I know there are a lot of artistic representations of Kakamora out there that leave the coconut fuzz on, but I don't like it, so I took it off. Totally up to you what you want to do. Either way, for me, all I have to do now is prime and paint this more of a tan color, and then cut out the eyes and draw on the facial design.
Everything is printed out and the faceplate is primed. It's time to put it all together and put on the finishing details.
I'm going to put just a quick layer of brown paint on the faceplate. That way it can dry while I work on the ball joints, and then we can paint the design on right after. Probably one more coat and that'll be good, but I'll do that in a minute. Alright, so I have drilled some pilot holes for my ball joints. So imagine that this is the North Pole, South Pole. That would make this the East and the West poles. For the shoulder joints, I find that the closer you can get to the East and West poles, the more intimidating your Kakamora is going to look, the more commanding. As you move them further in, you could start to make your Kakamora look goofier, which, depending on what you're going for, that might be nice. But for Kotu, I'm going to have the shoulder joints further back here towards the poles. And then for the positioning of the legs, I just put the legs about where I want to have them and set the coconut down, and then just trace around these areas with a pencil, and that's where I put my pilot holes. And then to attach the ball joints, it's as simple as taking a small screw, putting it in the hole of the ball joint, putting that in the pilot hole, and screwing it in. Now you want to screw this in enough to where it holds it securely in place and stops twisting, but just where it gets tight, and then you want to stop about there. Any further and you risk cracking the ball joint, which is not great. But that's one shoulder done. Now we just need the other shoulder and 2 legs. Okay, so we have all the ball joints securely attached in place, but before we put the limbs on, there's one more thing I need to do, because it's much easier before everything's attached. And that is adding the wrappings to the limbs. Because Kotu has wrappings on his arms and his legs. And I found the best material for those wrappings is Koban, or cohesive bandage. This is the stuff you get when you donate blood. So I found that it's pretty simple to take a strip about this long, rip it off, and then I cut this in half to thinner strips like this. And these thin strips are the perfect size to take and wrap around the arm. And the thing about Koban, cohesive bandage, is that it sticks to itself. So you just have to wrap it around and press it, and he's got a little arm wrapping. Pretty cool. We'll do the other one really quick. Boom. Now for the legs, I did the same thing, cutting strips into that same width. But then I cut strips in half again from those to about this size, because they also wrap around the toes. And I found these thin strips, you can kind of start them on the bottom and wrap it around the big toe, and then around the ankle. And that gives that kind of appearance that it's wrapped in between the toes. And again, it just sticks to itself. So then you take one of the full width ones and you cover it, which doubles up the layers and makes it more opaque. Now you got the full leg wrapping. So I'll do the other one and then we'll put the limbs on. Now the fun part, the moment we have all been waiting for. And there's our Kakamora. Okay, so this is Kotu's face, and I practiced it on the 3D printed faceplate. Now I just have to put the real thing on the coconut faceplate. This is made infinitely easier with paint pens, so I'll be using those here as well. But first I'm going to take a pencil and trace the lines on, and then I will paint over those. So everything's put together and looking pretty awesome if I do say so myself. Before I show you the finished product, I do want to introduce you to a couple of the other Kakamora that I was able to create with the extra things that I modeled. I was really only intending to make Kotu when I embarked on this project, but I got a little carried away with the modeling and I was having fun. So enjoy the fruits of that labor. Yeah, I also made the Chief. That one was especially fun to model, and all those files will be available in the description for free. But now, without further ado, I present to you Kotu the Kakamora. I swapped out his arm for the one with the loose fist, and now he can hold on to things, so that's probably how I'll display it. But that is Kotu the Kakamora. And friends.
And of course, there's nothing saying that you have to use pink for the limbs or use island materials for the accessories.
The important part is trying something new and hopefully having some fun along the way.
Make the Kakamora that you want to make.
Alright, that is one more project checked off of the big list. And technically it is on here somewhere. I just need to scroll down and find it. I think it's towards the bottom. Yep, there it is. So I just have to change this from Blender to Nomad sculpt and check it off. And again, the idea was just to do some sort of 3D sculpting, and I did that. I was just wrong about the program. And I'm looking forward to doing more 3D sculpting in the future and doing more modeling that way. So for that and for other projects, be sure to subscribe to the channel. And thank you for watching the video and leaving a comment. Now to the blooper reel.
I'm making Kotu. I'm making Kotu the Kakamora from Moana. I'm making Kotu the Kakamora from Moana too. Fudge. I'm making Kotu. Okay. Moana too. I'm making Kotu the Kakamora. From Moana too. I'm making Kotu the Kakamora from Moana too. Out of real coconuts. That one wasn't bad. There's coconut water all over my floor.